Coming up, looks like Alabama may have made a new coaching hire, and not to be outdone, the in-state rival Auburn doing the same thing. We'll tell you all about it next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello everyone, welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson, and we have thought out. We do this show from Atlanta every day, and yesterday Atlanta was kind of a rough place to be. As I look out the window here in our palatial studios, I can still see some snow on the ground, some ice, a little bit of a rough go for it over the last 24 hours.
Yeah, it looks like a little bit of like the Pacific Northwest right now. There's like, there's light snow on the ground, a lot of ice going on, but yeah, happy to be back for sure.
Now, are you a good driver in the snow?
I don't think so.
I don't think I am.
Yeah,
I said this on my earlier show this morning. I'm not that good of a driver to begin with.
Yeah.
You start mixing some ice and snow in the mix.
I mean, I got the truck, the four-wheel drive and all that, but I grew up in Florida, man.
Yeah.
I don't deal with that stuff. I don't mess with it.
As I've said before, I don't even want ice in my bourbon, much less to be mixing it with my roads when I'm trying to drive.
Good call, good call.
By the way, we'll have some visual evidence later on of just how, I guess, potentially severe it was in Atlanta. We'll have some fun with that later on. For now, though, let's dive into what you've come to expect, even if you missed it yesterday. Our first intent as we take a look at the big news around the SEC. Let me start with item number one here. The report that Alabama going to sort of stay in-house with its offensive coordinator hire as a replacement for Brian Daboll. Mike Locksley apparently going to get the tab here. We'll show you what has been reported. This from Scott Russell Football Scoop. Mike Locksley is expected to take over as offensive coordinator. Sources tell Football Scoop, and this hasn't really been disputed anywhere. It seems like this is bound to become official at any moment. Of course, we're also awaiting word that Tosh LaPoy, the likely defensive coordinator, is going to become official there as well. But as again, it follows Alabama closely. I imagine knows a lot about Locksley here. What is your thought on this guy being tabbed as the replacement for Brian Daboll?
I think it had to happen. I think that, listen, I think Nick Saban understands what he is as an offensive coordinator. I think he thinks he's an offensive, not innovator, but he knows the ins and the outs of offensive schemes. He was one of those guys that helped Brian Daboll transition really to college football, or helped him transition to kind of bring back some of the quarterback run type of plays that Lane Kiffin employed. I think that from a recruiting standpoint, this is where it makes the most sense. I think that Michael Locksley right now, being the co-offensive coordinator last season, kind of expected to take this job. He looks at the hierarchy of Alabama football and says, okay, I'm next man up. Well, now if he doesn't get this job, he's probably out the window. He's already been, it's been out there reported that he's talked to Florida State, a couple of other schools. So I think Nick Saban looked at it and said, we've got to keep this guy on board. We've already lost so many recruiting guys in our corner the last couple of years. Michael Locksley is a guy we had to keep on staff and had to keep happy.
And I think, look, I don't think this is as pivotal a hire as offensive coordinator decisions that Saban's made in the past. And he's made a lot of these. I don't think this is quite as pivotal. I think in 2014 when you hired Lane Kiffin, and you know how I feel about Kiffin as a play caller, I think he was a top-flight play caller. I think at that point in time, Alabama faced a bit of a crossroads. Did it want to go the way of LSU, which was restricting some of and sort of resisting some of the changes that exist in college football, or did it want to carve a different path? And Alabama chose to carve a different path with Lane Kiffin. That was a more pivotal hire than this. I think Locksley steps into a role that was largely, with all due respect to Brian Daboll, this is Lane Kiffin's job that Locksley's inheriting. Daboll was just a placeholder for a year here. And I think it's a little easier to sort of step in this job, this transition to what the offensive coordinator position is now, because of the work that Kiffin did over those 3 years.
And I think that's fair. And I think you're definitely right in this. My angle on that entire situation is I don't think we're done. I mentioned that a couple of days ago. I don't think this is just a one-man job. I look at Michael Locksley. He's the wide receiver coach at Alabama right now. He was the co-offensive coordinator this past season. Didn't call the plays. Obviously, Brian Daboll did that. I think there's still another hire left to make. I think that you see the Hugh Freeze name out there. I think Saban loves the thought of Hugh Freeze being on staff as an analyst. Maybe even look at Hugh Freeze as a quarterback coach with Michael Locksley staying with the receivers and kind of looking out at the entire offense. I don't know what the dynamic is. I know there's a lot of shifts getting ready to be made on the offensive side of the ball, and I think that Locksley brings a little bit, just a small bit of stability for Nick Saban in these roles.
I want to hear from Mike Locksley in a moment. He was on the Ryan Fowler SEC Country Alabama podcast back during National Championship Game week. Before that, though, let me read a couple comments here. Bo Molinari says, Saban says no to Freeze and yes to Michael of Locksley. Yeah, we'll kind of compare the Hugh Freeze situation to the Locksley situation a little later on in SEC Country Live today. Chip Gromlich also says Locksley was a disaster on and off the field at New Mexico. I won't speak to a lot of those off-the-field issues But in terms of on the field, lack of success as a head coach, there are a lot of coaches like that just sort of blow up as head coaches, and they kind of settle back into a comfortable spot as an assistant coach. I don't think you want to judge assistants on how they were as head coaches. I think that's probably an unfair thing to do.
Oh, listen, I played for a ton of them that were great assistant coaches that just had no business being head coaches, didn't have the management skills to really be in the head coach. And by the way, who hasn't blown up at New Mexico? I mean, when's the last time we've seen really any coach at New Mexico really succeed in that role? But everybody you talk to, everybody that's been interviewed, at least that I've seen, out of Maryland, out of Illinois, previous stops from Michael Locksley as offense coordinator, really love the guy. And the players that are on this team seem to love the guy. And I think that Nick Saban has a very large amount of respect for Michael Locksley.
Michael Beach says it's a great hire. He'll be ready for this job. How ready is he, and what does he want to do when he becomes the Alabama offensive coordinator officially? Well, Locksley, as I said, was on with Ryan Fowler, who hosts our Alabama podcast for SECCountry.com. And Ryan asked Mike, or Coach Locksley, what he looks for from an offense. What does he want the Alabama offense to be known for? Here's what Locksley said at the time just a few days ago.
So I think anytime you start developing an offensive identity, it starts with making sure that your best players touch the football. And we've got a lot of guys that are weapons. And so whether it's running the ball to win or throwing the ball to win, we want to create balance. And if they force us to throw the ball, we want to be efficient enough to be able to throw the ball. If they give us the opportunity to run the ball, we obviously want to be able to run the ball efficiently. And those are the things you do typically when you start putting together offenses.
Look, every offensive coordinator says they want to seek out balance. That's the biggest cliche in the sport. But to go back to Lane Kiffin here for a moment, I think he really did bring that to Alabama. He found a way to get Derrick Henry the Heisman Trophy in 2015 while also implementing some up-tempo spread concepts into what the offense did. I think last season, maybe the Alabama offense, for 2016, maybe that Alabama offense, maybe didn't have enough of that balance. It was a little too one-dimensional. You didn't have the deep threat passing because of Jalen Hurts. But if we assume that Tua Tagovailoa is going to be the starting quarterback for 2018, then achieving what Locksley calls for there, balance, that's going to be certainly achievable.
Yeah, balance is the big word. I listen to Michael Locksley speak, and anytime you have a coordinator like that, and I think we heard a little bit of Steve Ensminger say this last week in his LSU presser. I think that you get up there and you say, oh, what is your offense? It's multiple. It's dealing with the situation at hand and the players at hand. We're not going to come out and say automatically we're going to run 5 wide receiver because, listen, you might not have 5 good wide receivers. I think that Michael Locksley understands that under Nick Saban, listen, time of possession is a big deal. Running yards is a big deal. Staying on schedule is a big deal. But you also have weapons out wide. So you want to come out and be multiple in some of your sets. And I think that Alabama fans are excited to know that Michael Locksley kind of accepts that.
Quick final thought here. He steps into a big decision because of Jalen Hurts is, I think, maybe going to stay and look to compete for that job. How you handle this thing over the course of the offseason if Hurts does indeed stay, that's a bit of a challenge. He also talks about getting the ball to your best players. Alabama's got a host of really good running backs, a host of really good wide receivers. That's a really good thing, but as the cliche goes, there's only one ball. It's not going to be all easy for Locksley as he makes this transition, assuming he does officially get the job, right?
I don't think it's going to be easy at all. I look at a guy transitioning from what could be a wide receiver coach to an offensive coordinator to maybe a quarterback coach or whatever role he decides to have in this offense. There's going to be somebody else that's brought on board that's also going to be another coach in that direction. He's going to be directly over. I don't think it's easy at all. I think you try to construct a way. If you do get a look from Jalen Hurts, and Jalen Hurts does want to finish out his career at Alabama, find a way to construct a way for both of them to be on the field. I think Michael Locksley has a ton of work cut out for him. I just think that right now, with all the recruiting kind of on the fence at Alabama and all the coaches that have left, it was important to keep him on staff.
Look at Esteban Estevez, LSU fan, picking the Tigers to win the 2018 SEC Championship. Coming out of the block in a big way on today's show.
Yeah,
I like that.
Listen,
if you would have told me before,
if you would have told me before last year's show, that LSU was going to win, I would have been a little bit more of a believer. It's not that I don't believe in Ed Orgeron or Steve Ensminger. I just think LSU is talent-wise is taking a little bit of a step back this year.
Yeah, I think you're probably
right.
Yeah,
it's like, we can make all these bold claims and everything. It's just, listen, I love LSU football. You guys have heard me before. The athletes are always there. It's just, if we're going to construct without Darius Guice, without Arden Key, with all these pieces we've seen, Kevin Tolliver and Dante Jackson, and believe they're going to make a run, I think it's an uphill battle.
Yeah, Magic Fairies don't just deliver championships. They're sort of earned by the rosters that you build. Right now, I think the LSU roster's got some trouble, but I don't fault Esteban Estevez for coming big in the comment section on that. Let me move on here to item number 2, though, on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Alabama may be hiring quickly an offensive coordinator to replace Brian Dable. For sure, Auburn has acted quickly here to replace Herb Hand. It's departed offensive line coach. He goes to Texas, stepping in his place, a guy that Auburn fans know well, J.B. Grimes coming back for another stint of duty here as the Auburn offensive line coach. Grimes already kind of hitting the ground running here. We'll show you this picture from Twitter of Grimes kind of already on the recruiting trail, kind of knocking some things out there. And obviously, that's a big deal for Auburn here. They've got a lot of work to do with the offensive line here for the rest of 2018 and replace some guys, obviously, that depart from this team off the 2017 season. What do you think of Grimes? What do you expect from him in this role? You obviously know the offensive line position really well. Is this a good hire for Auburn? How do you feel about it?
I don't think it's the splash hire that maybe a lot of Auburn people are hoping, especially in recruiting. But listen, there you already see in the picture. I mean, he's already visiting a grad transfer in Calvin Anderson out of Rice, a guy that was a two-star, by the way, out of high school and comes in and gains like 70 pounds as soon as he gets on campus at Rice. That would be a huge win for them. I think you had to have a level of comfortability if you're Gus Malzahn, understanding that you're losing 4 guys. You're basically losing your entire running game at Auburn right now. You had to have somebody that you could plug in right away. I mean, by my count, it was 24 hours between the time that we knew there was an opening to the time that Grimes was hired. And then 5 hours after that, there's a picture. He's already on the recruiting trail, South Louisiana and Houston. So I don't know that it's as big a hire as you might have expected in the situation, but I think Gus Malzahn knew that was a guy he could call and that would come directly to Auburn.
William Gunning says he doesn't recruit as good, but he coaches better than Herb Hand. If that be the case, I mean, and you can tell me, obviously, you know, you played, so your opinion matters in this more than mine does. I'm going to take the better recruiter over the in-game coach every single time. I mean, I need these big giants, long arms, 6'5", 300, 30 pounds. I need those guys. I need the kind of coaches that can acquire those guys. So you're going to tell me that Grimes is a better on-field coach but not as good a recruiter? It makes me nervous from Auburn.
Well, it makes you nervous in the long term, but I think when you look at short term, and by the way, I completely agree with that. I don't think he's as good a recruiter as Herb Hand, but I like what he does on the field technically to get his players ready to play. I think that in the long term, yes, that becomes an issue. You look at recruiting, but you also look at the fact that Auburn is losing 4 of their 5 basically starters this year. You look at what's coming back on this offense line. It's going to be without Austin Golson, without Braden Smith. You need somebody that can go in there and get the likes of Calvin Ashley and some of the other players to play up to their capability. And if that takes bringing a guy in that's more technically sound than he is a good recruiter, then I think that's the right step at this point in time for Gus Malzahn. I think you get a guy that can try to mold, and then you work away from that in the next couple of years.
As far as Hand as an on-field coach, though, I mean, when you look at the Iron Bowl win against Alabama, look at the November home game win for Auburn against Georgia, I saw an offensive line. Those games look pretty well coached up. Now, people say, what happened with the 11 sacks against Clemson? I mean, early September, that's 1,000 years ago. I mean, I saw what I thought was development over the course of the season.
Well, and I don't think that was all in the offensive line either. I mean, you know me. I'm going to back the offensive line.
You're going to blame anybody but the 5 offensive linemen.
I am.
You're going to blame anybody but them. That's your MO.
Well, Stidham's running out of bounds 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. That's not on the offensive line that they get a sack in their column. I mean, come on, man. There's running backs missing. It just – I thought that, listen, this offensive line has the ability to be good this next year, and so that's why I don't mind this move. I think you bring a guy in that can mold the guys you have on your roster right now and worry about recruiting at another time.
I want to get Tyler Mann on an LSU comment here in a moment. Let me get Bo Molinari real quick, though, on the Auburn story. He says Auburn's new fight song should be "I'm not your stepping stone until y'all believe it." So he's basically insinuating that Herb Hand goes to Texas, probably more money, a little bit bigger title, maybe the viewpoint that Texas is a bigger job than Auburn. I mean, if you're an Auburn fan, should you feel a little offended that Texas apparently came onto the Plains and swiped one of your coaches? I mean, how you feel about that?
I think you have to be worried. I think that tells you a little bit about maybe what the staff feels as far as job stability goes at Auburn and under Gus Malzahn. I mean, remember, before he won these 2 games against #1 teams, we're questioning whether or not he's going to be at Arkansas next year. I mean, we're really going back and forth all the way up to the SEC title game. So, I think that it tells you a little bit of a story, but I'm not concerned about it at all. Auburn's going to find their coaches. That's why somebody comes running back within 24 hours.
So I want to read this comment by Tyler Mann. It's off this subject. Y'all got to understand, when we get to the offseason, one of the things that we do is we kind of allow y'all some latitude in terms of what you comment on. Sometimes I'll sort of break with the regular conversation to hit some of these comments. I think Tyler makes a really good point about LSU, and we always have very active LSU fans in our comment section. Tyler says that when it comes to February, the National Signing Day, he thinks LSU is going to close out with Patrick Surtain, Jamar Chase, and the quarterback from Birmingham. I think he actually means Montgomery. It's James Foster. I believe he's from Montgomery, not Birmingham. But nonetheless, Foster, who's about the top uncommitted quarterback prospect in the South. Jamar Chase, who's a big-time receiver, one-time Florida commit. Patrick Surtain, who's been thought to be an LSU lean for a while now. Obviously, Alabama kind of in the mix for him there a little bit too. I do think those are three names worth watching. Now, Surtain, I assume, is going to LSU. If he doesn't, that's a pretty bad loss for LSU. But in the case of Chase and the case of James Foster, if you can add that duo of offensive players to go along with Terrace Marshall, who's already in the fold there for LSU, there's no doubt about it. That's a good job of recruiting right there, especially for Foster, who I think Alabama is kind of in on a bit right now. As I said, probably the top uncommitted quarterback in the South. That'd be a pretty big win for LSU, especially on the heels of losing Matt Canada.
Yeah, I completely agree. And by the way, Foster, I mean, it seems like that Alabama's not really looking in that direction anymore. They go out and offer a quarterback out in Arizona this past weekend, a three-star quarterback. And so I wouldn't be shocked to see all three of those guys land at LSU either. And I think that obviously bodes well for the future. Does that change my pick for 2018 as far as SC goes? Probably not. I think you have to allow those guys some time to get in the program and develop a little bit. But it does make me feel a little bit better in the long run about what you're getting under Ed Orgeron and Steve Ensminger.
Jerry Lewis says, I don't care how LSU recruits. I'm curious if Coach O gets out of them what they're worth. As I said, I'm not sold on him until I see more consistency. That's fair. I have my doubts about Orgeron as well. But he would go a long way towards proving something to me if he could finish strong with this class, given the fact that LSU has appeared to be in a bit of turmoil here over the course of the last few weeks. Let me move on. Item number 3 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And maybe you're going to tell me I'm just trying to stir up trouble on this. And if I am, that's fine.
You know I will.
But, I love way too early top 25s. I told you that before. There is no point that's too early for me to start looking ahead to the upcoming season. I like these kinds of debates. I like this kind of stuff. And ESPN already kind of creating some perfect fodder for discussions like the one we do on this show every day. Mark Schlabach does his way too early top 25, but updated it after some of the junior migration towards the NFL, some of the guys that chose not to move on to the next level. Clemson, because of the fact that it's going to hold on to some of its top defensive linemen, Schlabach now has them at the top of his way too early top 25 here. So take a look at the top 5 from Schlabach at ESPN.com. And I see a couple of SEC teams that I both think have some gripes here. Alabama, the defending national champion, not being number 1. And then look at Georgia, ranked below Ohio State and Oklahoma here. I'm going to add to that even maybe Clemson as well. Now, I get the fact that Georgia's got a lot to replace, but Oklahoma lost Baker Mayfield. Ohio State lost J.T. Barrett. I think you can make a case that Georgia should maybe be a bit insulted by being number 5 here. I think you can make a case that Alabama should feel a bit insulted by being ranked below Clemson after they just essentially throttled Clemson a few days ago. So who's got the bigger beef? Alabama not being number 1 or Georgia being all the way down at number 5?
Well, if I'm being completely honest with you, I kind of like where both teams are ranked. Does that make sense? I know that doesn't make for a great show here as we're on camera and we sit here, but I don't know that Alabama has a ton of gripe. I think when you look back at the group they're getting back at Clemson, the front 7 that's going to be on that defense, Alabama handled them a couple of weeks ago, made them look like they were a non-factor in that game. But those guys seemingly got together and decided, listen, we're coming back to win another ring here at Clemson, and that is our sole goal. I also look at Georgia. Now I really like the directions Georgia's headed. The number 5 team, though, I don't know if you can gripe with that. When you look at how much productivity you're losing on the defensive side of the ball and the offensive backfield, I think 5 is fair. I think you could have the gripe to go up to 4, maybe at 3 if you're Georgia, but I think 5 is okay with them until that season kicks off.
All right, let me put Georgia aside for the moment because we've already got some commenters in the comment section talking about Georgia. Let me talk just about Alabama here for a bit. Are you telling me that if these two teams with their 2018 rosters play tomorrow and you had to put money on one side, there's no way you're betting Clemson in that spot? You're just not. So I mean, if you're not betting Clemson in that spot, then Alabama ought to be ranked number 1 ahead of them.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
I just saw the Alabama offensive line push around this Clemson group that's coming back.
Yeah.
If they came back, why would I think the results would be any different this time around? Because the Alabama offensive line is also a year older and a year better.
And I also think, I think Alabama's offensive line is actually going to be better next year possibly than it was this year, and that's a tough task. But it tells you how much really I value a front 7 on defense. I look at an offense that could look a lot different from Alabama next year, possibly a pocket passer in Tua Tagovailoa, maybe not having the running aspect of a Jalen Hurts in the backfield. Maybe that allows Clemson's D-line to tee off in situations like that. I think it would be a close game. If I'm picking it right now, I'm not picking Alabama to run away with it by any means.
Christopher Colley says Georgia should be ranked higher. I actually think that's true. I think Georgia should be ranked ahead of both Ohio State and Oklahoma in this discussion. You can debate the Alabama thing if you want. Anthony Ruffin says Georgia's going to be lucky to go 8-4 this upcoming season. Listen, if that's what you're hanging your hat on, that Georgia, because it's losing Chubb and Michelle and Carter and Roquan Smith and Davin Bellamy, if you think Georgia's going 8-4, you're going to be miserable next fall. I'm just telling you, you're going to be miserable. This Georgia roster overall, from a composite standpoint, is going to be more talented in 2018 than it was in 2017. Now, I know you've got to replace the leadership, and the individual talent of Roquan Smith, the Butkus Award winner in particular, is a very difficult thing to replicate. But Georgia's no worse than number 5 next season, I think.
Yeah, I understand.
And if you don't think so, that's fine.
Well, I don't know that I have as much going into Georgia this year as possibly other people do. I think that Georgia's going to be a very good team. Don't get me wrong. The only reason I say that 8-4 is kind of a joke because show me where the 4 losses are.
Yeah.
I don't know that Georgia's as good. I don't know that Georgia's as good as they were this past year, but I don't know where you're getting 4 losses from. I don't see 4 losses on the schedule as far as Georgia goes. Now
you got to go to LSU. That's the tough SEC road game.
There's definitely tough games in there. There's always a chance that you go down and get beat by Florida. I'm obviously higher on Florida this year than some other people are, especially a bunch of Georgia fans, but I just don't know where you're finding 4 losses. I don't know that Georgia's as strong. Now, I think it's tough for them to reload in the backfield with the loss of those 2 running backs. You got to find another Roquan Smith. You got to find some people in that secondary that can take up for some of the people you have leaving. But 4 losses, to me, I'm just not sure where they come. As strong as they're going to be in the trenches, I'm not sure where the 4 come from.
I'm looking at the 2018 schedule right now. There are only 2 games that Georgia has even a chance of being a point spread underdog. It's at LSU on October 13th. It's home versus Auburn on November 10th. If I had to guess, I'm guessing Georgia's a favorite in both those games. Now, being a favorite doesn't guarantee a win. I get that. But I'm looking at a schedule right now where Georgia's at least a favorite 10 times, maybe a favorite in all 12 of its games. I think because of that, because of the fact that, Georgia's replacing some household names, but doing it with 4- and 5-star guys coming out of high school, I think overall Georgia's probably a top 5 team. But I get the fact that Georgia's, at least from some SEC fans, Mike, I get the fact that Georgia's going to get less credit than a team like Alabama, who they've seen replace talent over and over again. People haven't seen Kirby Smart do that at Georgia yet. So I get the skepticism, given the fact that Georgia's not been a fixture on the national landscape. But you're talking about a huge collection of running backs. You're still talking about Jake Fromm, who I think is a Heisman candidate next season. You're talking about a defensive line that's still really good and a secondary that's probably better next season. Offensive line that's probably better next season. So that's kind of my thought on Georgia.
Yeah,
in that regard.
And I agree with you. I think there's a ton of talent to be spread around, but I go back to like a 2010 Bama team that had Julio Jones and Marcel Darius and Mark Ingram and Trent and Greg McElroy comes back at quarterback. Somehow they lose to South Carolina. They almost get beat by Arkansas. They lose the game going down to Death Valley and LSU against a team they were probably better than. So the losses could be out there. I just think that if you're counting on 4 for Georgia next year, I think that's a little bit overblown. I wouldn't be shocked to see them lose 1 or 2 regular season games next year. Like I said, I'm not as high on Georgia as some other, but I look at number 5, maybe 5 to 10, and I think that's a good landing place for them right now.
Tolbosh Malone says, why would there even be a ranking this early? It's all controversy. And Tolbosh, here's the thing. I totally admit that. This whole conversation is all meaningless because, it is not even, it's barely even mid-January, okay? So I get, this is the way too earliest of the way too early top 25s. I totally get that. And yet I still, I live for this kind of stuff. I get so energized by, y'all telling me who you think is going to be good next season, me sort of responding to that. So, yeah, this is all sort of made for online video type debate, but I just find it to be incredibly fun and absolutely enjoyable. So, yeah, there's a bit of sort of contrived controversy about this from ESPN.com, but I'll take debate on that every single time for sure. Speaking of, by the way,
I was going to say that I'm kind of surprised right now at some of the conversations we do get in the comment section about LSU and Georgia next year. I think that does make for a little bit of a juicy matchup. Now, obviously, I think Georgia is definitely going to be the point spread favorite, like my friend Brandon Adams likes to say, the point spread favorite. But LSU is not without talent. I think that LSU is one of those teams that it's like we talked about all offseason. I always give LSU the benefit of the doubt when they're going up against talent because LSU always finds a way to play tough, specifically at the lines of scrimmage, and that is the one place that Ed Orgeron has done a good job of replenishing what they have.
Yeah, it's one thing for me to say I don't think that LSU is going to compete for the SEC championship. It's another thing to suggest they won't be hard to beat. LSU is still incredibly hard to beat, and the most telling game for me of the entire season, at least from the SEC, may have been that trip that Auburn took to LSU when everything seemed to suggest that Auburn was going to break its long losing streak there in Death Valley, end up losing that game because of what happens in the 3rd and 4th quarter there. That was a really telling result for an LSU team that I thought was, frankly, inferior to Auburn, but in Death Valley, those Bengal Tigers still a very difficult team to beat.
Exactly. That's kind of what I fall back on, too, and obviously, as we go into the offseason, we'll break down schedules a ton more, but anytime you go into Death Valley, and no matter how good you think you are, trust me, I went in there, as the #1 team before back in 08. It's tough. It's tough pace to play. They always have athletes, and they always have a puncher's chance of being able to get it done at home. That's what makes that scary for me.
All right, speaking of Georgia, one of its chief competitors in the SEC East, I believe the chief competitor for Georgia in the East for 2018 is going to be the South Carolina Gamecocks. They are the subject of item number 4 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10, and I don't think there's any question about it. Hands down, the best video department in the entire SEC right now belongs to South Carolina. They have some really, really good hype videos. This is a great off-season hype video with kind of a cool catchphrase. Let me let you watch some of this and tell me if you think this catchphrase has a chance to sort of, if you'll pardon the phrase, catch on. Take a look.
And underclassmen, when you get back in January, all gas, no brakes.
Oh, yeah! I want to win. I want to win back. You want to win back. So, hey, have the attitude that, hey, nothing's going to get your way. You're going to get what you want. I'm trying to make you be comfortable being uncomfortable. All gas, no brakes on 3. 1, 2, 3. All gas, no brakes.
So that's kind of the video. The phrase they use there is the all gas, no brakes. That's you heard they sort of broke it down, the all gas, no brakes. First of all, working out in the cold weather and seeing your breath, that'll never not be cool to me. That's like making the smoke come out of your mouth because you're sort of working out in the cold. That'll never not be cool to me. I like the video. I kind of like all gas, no brakes as a phrase. I sort of like it seems to fit for me with the energy that I believe that Muschamp is bringing to that program. I am very high on Will Muschamp. I think that Muschamp is doing some really good things at South Carolina. I think that video there does a pretty good job of kind of telling that tale a little bit. Does it work on you in the same way?
Is it too early to say I'm buying in? I mean, I get excited watching that. I really do. I get excited about watching that. I get excited about the fact that South Carolina returns all their skill players. I mean, it returns Jake Bentley, all their skill players, all their running backs. You lose Hayden Hurst. You lose a couple of offensive linemen. You lose some spots on defense. You lose Sky Moore. But I'm telling you, slowly, I'm starting to buy into the South Carolina program. I'm really buying into what Will Muschamp's doing. I thought he showed a ton of change from what he has been in the past as a coach by firing Kurt Roper, bringing in a new offensive coordinator, bringing in some new recruits, trying to change the outlook on South Carolina football. I'm not ready to say I'm favoring them in the East next year, but I feel really good about the direction.
Dedrick Frazier, who's a Georgia fan, says, hey, it's a nice phrase, but I'm already sick of it, LOL. So Dedrick not buying into that.
Yeah.
Jerry Lewis, though, says that Muschamp's going to make some Florida fans jealous next season. I think that's true. I think what Muschamp is doing at South Carolina right now, I'm not talking about history, I'm not talking about anything like that. Right now, South Carolina is a better program than Florida is.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. And listen, I'm high on what Florida is under Dan Mullen. I think that they start to bounce back in year one. I don't know that they find their stride really until year two. I think obviously Emory Jones has to be a big part of what they're trying to do down there. But if you're asking me about Will Muschamp right now, and obviously Georgia right now in the East is the standard, I think that Will Muschamp is closer than any other program in the East right now. I think you look at Tennessee, their remake under Jeremy Pruitt. You look at what Dan Mullen's trying to do at Florida. But right now, South Carolina is edging in that direction where they could be the next program to really make that big leap.
Esteban Estevez says we get excited watching Teletubbies. Yeah, we like the hype videos. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I enjoy the hype videos. Dustin Goodwin says South Carolina ends up with a better record than LSU. That's an interesting prediction. I would probably agree with that. Wyman Bale says haters going to hate. Go Gamecocks. Logan Westerman, though, says, why does everyone keep talking about Muschamp? He may have changed, but I'm just not sold. He needs to win the big games before I give him any respect. Fair enough, Logan. But here's the thing you got to realize. To the extent you care about way too early top 25s at all, every major national website's got its own. I think SEC Country, we even had probably one, too. South Carolina is going to show up in all of them. Yeah. South Carolina is a preseason top 25 team in everybody's books. That means they are 1 or 2 extra wins away from being a whole lot better than that. You're just as likely to be above that as below that necessarily. So the rest of the country may be talking about come this fall what we've been talking about here for the last couple minutes on SEC Country.
Yeah, and I think the big thing when you look at South Carolina next year too, and I just pulled up the schedule, their games are mostly at home. The tough games are mostly at home. Now, you're going to have to go on the road. You're going to have to go to, obviously, a tough place to play in Vanderbilt Stadium in Nashville. You're going to have to go play in Kroger Field in Lexington, Kentucky. Yeah. But most of their games that are conference games are at home, and I think that points in the direction of them taking a little bit of a leap.
Bo Molinari also mentioned a good point here, too, that they have to play Texas A&M every single year. Jimbo Fisher going to A&M doesn't help South Carolina, but you got to play somebody.
Yeah.
A couple other quick comments, we'll get out of here, or at least on this topic. Chet Matt Andrews obviously likes Muschamp as a South Carolina fan. Michael Cooper, though, however, says hype videos don't win games. They don't win games, but they're still better to have them than not, right?
Yeah.
I mean, right now, the rest of the SEC is playing for second when it comes to South Carolina's hype videos.
And they might not win the games directly, but guess what those hype videos are doing? Those are going to recruits. You're sending those out and saying, listen, man, we're out here practicing in snow.
Yeah.
Make sure you come be a part of this program. So in a way, it helps a little bit.
Carolyn Horning says Muschamp's slogan should be, can you supersize those fries? That's not true, y'all. Carolyn, that's not fair. Muschamp's doing a better coaching job than some of y'all give him credit for. I'm just telling you.
He is.
Some of y'all don't give him any credit whatsoever. He's doing a better job than that.
Look at how that bowl game turned out against Michigan. You talking about a comeback? I was shocked at what I saw. It really, I was already believing in Muschamp, but it made me buy in just a little bit more of what I was seeing in front of my face.
Jerry Hansen says, all gas, PU. Thank you, Jerry.
That's me. That's my slogan at
We
home.
appreciate you taking us such an erudite place here. All right, so a lot of comments kind of coming in on that. We'll see where things go with South Carolina. They could be one of those swing teams in the SEC for 2018, though. Let me move back to Alabama, though, for a minute here for item number 5. And you're going to have to tell me what all this is about. A lot of this is just really pretty strange. So the last time we had a show, which seems like 7 years ago, given the snow and ice that Atlanta dealt with on Wednesday, we talked about Nick Saban kind of parading Hugh Freeze there at the Alabama football office. And I say parading because it was almost for sure intended to become public. Every single, what I call the blue check brigade, all the major reporters all had their source that cited Freeze that was there in Tuscaloosa. That couldn't have been by accident. But now in the aftermath of that, we hear about a possible rift between Saban and the people at Alabama, unnamed. Aaron Suttles from the Tuscaloosa News is the source for this report. He writes, Saban's really pushing for Freeze to be an on-the-field coach. The Tuscaloosa News has learned others in the program don't want that happening. How much autonomy Saban has in this particular situation is unknown, given Freeze's recent history with the NCAA. Suttles goes on to kind of say in that same report that the thought is that they'd have to check with Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, before they hired Hugh Freeze. There's some debate about how true that is, but nonetheless, a possible rift with Saban and some other folks about Hugh Freeze. Here's the part about this that I don't understand. Who has enough power at Alabama to beef with Saban over Hugh Freeze? Greg Byrne, the athletic director, I'm assuming that he doesn't. There's nobody else in the football office that could even come close. Who could possibly be on the other side of Saban on this story? If Saban wanted Freeze, wouldn't he get Hugh Freeze?
He would. There's no doubt in my mind. He was no doubt in anybody's mind that if Saban wants Hugh Freeze on staff, and it's even remotely possible that it'll happen. I think the name you are looking for is the one you brought up in Greg Byrne. I think that Greg Byrne, listen, this is Nick Saban's third AD at Alabama. He's only been on the job for a year. He understands. Look, I see the Ole Miss situation. I see that once everything happens like that, everybody's job is being called for. You understand that everybody underneath you could cost you your job nowadays. With the way things spread and the way news rumors leak out and the way everybody's covering 24-hour news cycle, that if something messes up under Hugh Freeze, that your job could be on the line in Greg Byrne. So maybe there is a little kickback. But like I said, in the end, if Nick Saban wants to hire him, Nick Saban's going to hire him. Greg Byrne's not going to tell him no. Greg Sankey's not going to tell him no. Nick Saban's going to do what Nick Saban finds beneficial for the program.
So you're saying that if you brought in Hugh Freeze, a guy that, listen, I hate to be so blunt about this, but for the most part, when you bring in a guy in who's had a really checkered past, you're looking for sort of a year of being clean before you want to buy into the idea that he's a changed person. I mean, if Freeze has changed at all, it's because he got caught, and it hasn't even been that long ago. So there's a chance that whatever he was doing in terms of dialing phone numbers he shouldn't have been dialing, the second he's got a paycheck again, there's a chance he'll just start doing all that again. And you're saying that you think that could put Nick Saban in jeopardy at Alabama if Freeze were to be hired and made some bad personal choices?
Listen, let's not go over the top here. Nick Saban's not in trouble.
I don't want to parse your words.
Greg Byrne. I think that Greg Byrne worries about that. I think Greg Byrne.
That's a different kind of thing.
I think Greg Byrne looks at it and says, listen, I've seen things happen with coaches. We've seen it in other sports throughout the NCAA. As soon as something bad happens with a coach, guess what? That AD is on the hot seat. We've seen it at Auburn. We've seen it at Louisville. We've seen it at other places around the country that if something happens underneath you, then all of a sudden everybody's calling for your job. So I think Greg Byrne says, listen, I've been here a year. Hugh Freeze has only been, away from his struggles for 5 months. I need to see a little bit more of a track record. Now, you can flip-flop back and forth about whether that's about a coaching position or an analyst role or the offensive coordinator position. I think that Greg Byrne is just a little bit timid about it.
So there are two very opposing points of view here. Tanner Davis in the comment section says Freeze would be a good hire. Cliff Nelson says Freeze is too toxic at this moment in time. Next year would be better after NCAA sanctions aren't tied to Freeze anymore. Ultimately, I think I probably agree with both guys. I think that Hugh Freeze is a terrific coach. There's no denying that. He's a better offensive coordinator than Mike Locksley would be almost for sure. But as far as him being too toxic, that's probably true. So, therefore, is it a good thing for Saban to sort of use his credibility, use the cachet of Alabama, just to rehabilitate Hugh Freeze's image for a guy that's ultimately going to end up coaching somewhere else? Yeah. Is that how Alabama fans want their program to be used here?
I don't know. Listen, I don't think you can speak for Alabama fans, and most of the ones I've talked to have been split almost 50-50 on the topic. It's some people that don't want anything to do with Hugh Freeze, and other people think, national title bound if Hugh Freeze is on board. I think that Nick Saban looks at Michael Locksley and says, well, we can't mess up this situation. We can't lose the recruits. We can't lose Michael Locksley. What can I do to kind of offset some of my expectations for what Locksley might be in 2018? Bringing a guy like Hugh Freeze that can be behind the scenes, that can watch film with him, that can kind of, sit underneath everything else and kind of help out from the sideline. I think that's what Nick Saban looks at this as an opportunity to do.
Esteban Esteves, who is an LSU fan, says Freeze would fit in right in Alabama. That's not a compliment the way that Esteban means that. And whether that you want to go down that road or not, one thing is true. The only coach in the SEC who has enough of a built-in, bulletproof reputation to hire Hugh Freeze is Nick Saban. I'll give you, for instance, there was a report from a website that covers Georgia about a month or so ago that Hugh Freeze had been working maybe even as an unpaid analyst for Georgia. Georgia, the official athletic department, released an official statement denying that he was even working as an unpaid analyst.
Yeah.
That's how, to use Cliff Nelson's phrase from our comment section earlier, that's how toxic Hugh Freeze might be. The only coach who could even pretend to go down this road right now is Saban, for better or for worse, and I guess it's worth debating if Saban should even go down it.
Yeah, and it's like we talked about last week. I mean, he's the only guy with enough clout and enough built up, I don't even know what you want to call it, with his fan base to be able to make a call like that. I agree. It's like I said, I don't want to continue to judge Hugh Freeze. I think he hurt himself and his family more so than maybe he did anything else. So I try to move on from that. But, it's tough for me to look at the situation with Hugh Freeze when I was so hard on him when he got fired to think that maybe he's going to help the university that I love and cheer for to possibly win another national title. It does scare me a little bit.
To Terry Crews in the comment section, this is just mean. So we have a guy that comments a lot. His name is Jeremy Pettis. He's a big Alabama fan. Apparently he's not with us today because Terry Crews says, man, things are so much quicker without Jeremy Pettis here. First of all, is that the way y'all talk about me when I'm not here? You start, ripping on guys? Jeremy's not here. You said the pace of the show is quicker because he's not commenting? That seems a little out of line.
Yeah, it does.
Come on, Terry.
It does. And you guys, and you know what's funny too?
That seems out of line.
And you know what's funny too, when I do watch the comment section, is almost all the fan bases are the same, and almost all the college football fans are the same. And it's like we tend to rip on each other like everybody's like so much different. Whenever it's just everybody's kind of the same, just wearing different colors.
Jerry Lewis says he's got my bag. Jerry, I appreciate that. But in this case, I think Terry Crews and Jeremy Pettis, they're Alabama fans together. Yeah. Isn't Terry an Alabama fan? I think he's got the crimson and white in his Facebook image there. That's a couple of Alabama fans going at it. That's a little disappointing.
I think that Terry Crews is a Georgia fan.
Is that right?
If I'm reading this picture right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I got that confused. Terry, I apologize.
It says forever, not just when we win, something like that.
Okay, I apologize, Terry. In fact, I've seen Terry on Dog Nation Daily, so I should have known that better myself. All right, let me move on here to item number 6 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. So it looks like there's a report out there that Auburn has settled on its new athletic director, Brandon Marcello from the Auburn 24/7 sports side. I believe it's called Auburn Undercover. He gets this first, it looks like. Brandon writing that Buffalo Athletics Director Alan Green has emerged as Auburn's choice to replace Jay Jacobs as athletic director. Auburn Undercover has learned. The quote here is, we don't have any information on the AD search until the announcement's made. That comes from a spokesman at Auburn to Brandon Marcello there from 24/7 Sports. But it looks like Alan Green's going to be the guy. I guess he'd be just the second African-American athletic director in SEC history, and obviously facing a big job at Auburn in terms of cleaning up the mess that Jay Jacobs kind of oversaw in a lot of different sports over the last few years. You know how I feel about athletic directors. At least maybe you do. I don't know. I've said this before. The only thing I think an athletic director is supposed to do is give the football coach what he asks for. That's how I judge the success of an athletic director. You are a good AD if you can find a way to say yes to the things that a coach wants. Yeah. And if you're going to say no, you better have a good reason for why you're saying no. So from that standpoint, that's how I'm going to judge Green here. You can judge athletic directors how you want to based on your own criteria. Do you have any opinion whatsoever on this guy coming down from Buffalo to maybe take over the Auburn program?
I can't let this go by without noticing this. Cliff Nelson in the comment section, I think this tells it perfectly about how a lot of fans feel about Hugh Freeze. He says, Hugh Freeze is too toxic. You can't bring him in. You have to wait a year. And then his next comment says, I'm hoping Freeze will become to coach quarterbacks at LSU next year. Like, is that not a perfect little microcosm of like how fans feel? Like, you know what? He's too toxic, but he's a hell of a coach.
This guy unless he's coaching my squad.
Unless he's coaching my squad.
Well, you heard the rumor about that. The LSU fan's buddy Les Miles, had he gone to the Arizona job, he was going to take Hugh Freeze with him. I don't know if that's true, but that rumor had been out there.
Yeah. I think that just encompasses the way a lot of people feel about Hugh Freeze right now. But going back to the Allen Green thing, I think what's interesting about this hire is this. Here you have a guy that's stepping in to be the AD at a huge SEC school. It's his first time, big job. And the great thing about it is he's got a coach that's already been approved. You don't need to make, you don't need to raise this money for a coach's salary. Gus Malzahn's making $7.5 million a year. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, he just got a huge pay raise. So it's like almost like he can wipe his hands clean and say, you know what? There's no big decisions for me to make anytime soon. You guys gave him that money. You're the ones that were part of this decision. I don't have to put him on the hot seat anytime soon. He's guaranteed too much money. You guys have backed me into a corner. So I think right off the top that this is a kind of a cush job for Allen Green in terms of what he's being asked to do here in the first couple years. I think he just has to not mess up, in my opinion. There's been questions asked about Bruce Pearl. There's been questions about the softball program in Auburn right now. Just don't mess up in these hires.
I think that's a really interesting point that his decision in terms of Gus Malzahn's already been made for him because of the money that Malzahn's going to make. That's a really interesting point. But if you're Green and you do end up getting this job, don't you have your own personal popularity to think of? Because ultimately athletic directors are sort of like politicians. They're really a lot more like politicians than they are coaches.
Right.
And if you're having to sort of think of a politically correct way to say, assuming that Malzahn doesn't capitalize on the win against the Alabama in the Iron Bowl, the victory against Georgia, assuming they don't build on that for 2018 and beyond, then you've got to think of some pretty creative ways to explain why Malzahn's remaining as coach other than, hey, we just can't afford to fire him.
Yeah.
And the more you sort of stumble and stammer over your own words, the more you put your own popularity at risk at that point in time. So from that standpoint, is it as easy as it looks, given the fact that he may have to try to explain away a real tough situation, that there's just not enough money to fire a coach that everybody decided they wanted to keep because he beat Alabama in the Iron Bowl?
I think the reason I look at it from that dynamic is because I love what's going on in Auburn way more than I look at the circumstances that were surrounding Jeff Long in Arkansas. Jeff Long was ousted. Brett Bielema was ousted. You were making decisions with an interim AD and a board of directors and all these different things going on in Arkansas. All of a sudden, Allen Green steps in, and Jay Jacobs still isn't even off the job. He's kind of headed out this summer, this spring, and he's like, you know what? Hey, you guys, I'll just kind of take the wheel and make sure I keep her steady. I don't have to make any big decisions. I love that so much more. The smooth transition that they had at Auburn, due to all the stuff that's been going on the last year, the smooth transition as opposed to what's going on at Arkansas.
By the way, I like this comment from Terry Crews, who we were talking about before. He says, "I come to watch Cliff Nelson and Jeremy Pettis in the comment section as much as I come to watch BA and Mike." Terry, I understand where you're coming from on that. Mike and I have always said the same thing before. We like watching the comment section during the show as much as, like, when he's talking, I'm watching what y'all are saying, and I think he does the same thing vice versa. So it's a lot of fun here on the program every day. Let me move on and talk again about a subject that I talked about on, would have been Tuesday, I guess. I'm really impressed with what's going on at Tennessee. Let me make that the subject of item number 7 here on our SEC Country Life First and 10. A lot of examples that there is some recruiting momentum building with the Vols. Now, it's got to lead to something. You've got to do more than just finish second with these kinds of guys. But they've already gotten the big win with J.J. Peterson, so some things are happening here. Let me show you first this tweet from Isaac Taylor Stewart. Taylor Stewart, who was a 5-star cornerback, from out in California, a lot of SEC schools in the mix. He's taking an official visit to Alabama coming up. I guess it's next weekend maybe, coming up very soon. Florida's trying to get in on him. But Taylor Stewart's showing some love for the Vols here. Says Tennessee is still on February 2nd, looking forward to #GoVols. I'm assuming this tweet's in reference to the fact that that a Georgia official visit got rescheduled because, or he says rescheduled, right now it's up in the air if it's even going to happen, but because of the fact that Taylor Stewart has sort of set his Alabama official visit. So that's Taylor Stewart there showing, Isaac Taylor Stewart there showing some love for Tennessee. You've also got Emmett Gooden, who's a pretty big-time respected junior college defensive tackle. quoted here by SEC Country explaining what he likes about Jeremy Pruitt, that his main selling point to me right now is to secure the state, lock down the state. Of course, he likes my playing style. I can fit their scheme and things like that. That's good in the guy that's been linked to a lot of different SEC schools. Now really feeling the love from Jeremy Pruitt in Tennessee and maybe showing some more love to the Vols in a way that had not been going on. But wait, that's not all. One of the top players in the entire country for the class of 2019 is Owen Popo, a linebacker from the state of Georgia, a guy that's been thought to maybe be a Georgia lean as of late. Clemson been heavily involved with Popo as well. But right now, Popo seems pretty interested in Tennessee, and Jeremy Pruitt in particular. Here's what Popo told our SEC Country Tennessee podcast about what he thinks makes Pruitt such an effective recruiter on the trail.
Well, the proof is in the pudding. You can just look at all the players he's coached in the past, and just look at the things that that he helped did at Alabama. So things like that help me have interest in him.
So a lot to digest there. In the mix for Emmett Gooden, getting an official visit from Isaac Taylor Stewart, something that a school like Georgia might not get right now. Owen Popo, maybe even postponing his commitment because of some attention he's getting from Tennessee. I don't think it can be denied that right now Tennessee under Jeremy Pruitt is making some things happen in recruiting.
Yeah, and it's almost, in a way, exactly what we expected when he took the job, is it not? I mean, you knew he was going to be a strong recruiter. I talked about it. You almost clear what you see in year one in this recruiting circle because of the different dynamics, the long head coaching search, the toxic head coaching search, and then the long extended tenure for him going to the national title game under Alabama. I wasn't sure that you could get things turned around in that short of a window. But when you look at the fact that J.J. Peterson's on board, you look at a guy, some of the other guys throughout the Southeast, Quay Walker or Jacob Copeland, some of the other guys that might be getting visits, he is building something. It's undeniable that he is building some momentum on the recruiting trail. Now, do you get an Elijah Griffin? I don't know. I don't know how many of these guys actually end up signing on the dotted line, but it's a positive sign nonetheless that they're even visiting Tennessee right now, considering how the last month and a half has been.
I like Jamie Bailey's comment. He says Pruitt's making it happen-ish. Yeah, I mean, but that's something, because what you said a moment ago I actually don't agree with. You said, hey, this is what we all thought would happen with Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee. The truth is he's actually doing better than I probably thought he would do. His relationships with guys who were either Alabama leans or Alabama commits, he's maintained them better at Tennessee than I thought he would. I never thought for a second he'd get J.J. Peterson's commitment. Entertaining Quay Walker well enough that Walker cancels a planned visit to Florida. That's actually more success than I thought Pruitt would have. I like Bailey's way of saying it's momentum-ish. There's no way of knowing how many of those guys are truly going to end up signing. Tennessee's still got a long way to go to sort of build out a full roster here. But he's really looking a little bit like Kirby Smart and Kirby's early going at Georgia. Now, Smart signed the nation's number 8 class in his first season at Georgia. Pruitt's not going to do that. But, man, he's winning and turning some heads with some guys that I did not think he probably would have been able to.
Well, I think Bull Molinari brings it up in the comment section, too. He says, come on, B.A., you can't be high on all the teams in this. Tennessee may be better than Vandy, but Florida, Georgia, South Carolina. Now, the question I would pose coming out of that comment is, who do you feel has a higher trajectory right now? Is it Tennessee or is it Florida?
For me, without a doubt, it's Tennessee.
It's Tennessee without a doubt.
Now, you got to understand something here, though. It's two different things to say who's going to be better in 2018 and sort of the long-term trajectory. There may be overall enough leftover talent at Florida. They may be better than Tennessee this upcoming season. That may happen. But if I had to buy stock in one of these two teams right now, I'd buy stock in Tennessee over Florida for a long shot. And I think a lot of the success that Pruitt's having here in his first few weeks on the job at Tennessee, I believe it's coming at the expense of Florida.
Yeah.
This is a zero-sum game where Tennessee's gains are actually being taken from Florida in some respects.
Right, but I understand that. I think, listen, and I love what Jeremy Pruitt's doing, but if you're asking me right now the difference between the two trajectories, I'm still pointing to Dan Mullen. I think that Dan Mullen, with Florida in his backyard down there and the recruiting base that is the speed in South Florida, Dan Mullen's trajectory right now is through the roof for me. Now, like you said, I don't know that it happens next year. I don't know what happens with either one of these teams in the coming season. There's a ton of holes to fill. But Dan Mullen is an offensive guy at a place where you have a ton of offensive weapons, and I think he can make it work.
One more thing from Jamie Bailey here, who says Florida thinks it does have its quarterback, obviously referencing Emory Jones. Emory Jones being really good would change my opinion maybe a little bit, but based on what I think I know about Emory, I still think I like the Tennessee situation better right now. Maurice Carter, who is a Georgia fan, by the way, says Tennessee may seem to make some noise, but not enough to be heard loud and clear. That's true. I mean, listen, y'all know this. We're not doing a mainstream media type show here. We're people who pay very close attention to the SEC every day. I'm not telling you that Kirk Herbstreit knows the first thing about Jimmy Pruitt at Tennessee. He's not making that kind of national waves yet. I mean, that's just a fact. He's not. The Feinbaum callers, are they sort of weighing in on Pruitt right now? Maybe not. But on this show, we do try to look a little deeper than just what's going on the surface. And I'm telling you, underneath the surface, bubbling below that sort of mainstream layer, there is some positive things moving in the direction for Pruitt at Tennessee. Now, once again, I'll sort of caveat all this by saying you've got to do more than finish second with these guys. You've got to get some actual signatures from them. But a lot of guys are paying attention to Tennessee right now.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, too, the dynamic between the two programs. I think that if Florida had Jared Garantano as the quarterback coming back this year with that wide receiver core, I think you feel really good about Florida. On the flip side, if Tennessee had half the playmakers that Florida's going to return this coming up year, I think you feel really good about Tennessee. But I think both of them are such incomplete teams at this stage, just kind of in wait-and-see mode.
Michael Cooper says, I'd like Florida better if they just release a hype video. Here's the thing. I sort of get the shot, and that's pretty funny, but we don't like every hype video. We play every hype video, but we don't like every hype video.
We're harsh judges.
Yeah, we've been to Siskel and Ebert, which you have to be 100 years old even to know who I'm talking about when I say that. But we're sort of the movie critics of hype videos here. Thumbs up, thumbs down. We've given thumbs down to a few before.
Didn't Siskel died like 20 years ago? Did he not? Roger Ebert, he's still pumping them out.
Now. But some people know who I'm talking about when I say that. But the point is, we don't like every hype video, but we do enjoy playing them.
Tough graders.
All right, let me move on here to item number 8 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And since the way too early top 25 was such fun fodder before, let's bring it back one more time here. This time, though, about a team outside the SEC, which I think could have major implications for a team in the SEC. I'm talking about Auburn, who's got a Week 1 battle against a Washington team that apparently Mark Schlabach from ESPN.com thinks is going to be pretty good. He moved the Huskies up in his way to early top 25 from number 8 to number 7. The reason why is, he writes, the Huskies look like the class of the Pac-12 in 2018. They might even be a college football playoff contender now that tailback Myles Gaskin has decided to return to school. So you've got Auburn in Mercedes-Benz Stadium the first week of the season playing a team that Mark Schlabach thinks is a playoff contender and the number 7 team in the country. It's an Auburn team, by the way, that just a few weeks ago thought it was a playoff contender. Then lost to Georgia in the SEC championship game, lost to UCF in the Peach Bowl. I know this is kind of a weird thing to say, but is this game against Washington must win for Auburn to validate that giant contract that Gus Malzahn just received?
Must win. I'm not ready to say must win. I think that when you look at a game that early, it's kind of the same dynamic you looked at Alabama, Florida State last year. Do they have to win the game? I don't think so. I think that either one of these teams could make a shot at the college football playoff with a loss. I think that this is actually, I think it's a bigger game for the Pac-12 than it is for Auburn. You know what I mean? Like, I think when I look at the Pac-12 and what they have to try to get accomplished next year to start saving face on the national landscape, I think they have to win this game against Auburn. Coming to the Southeast, playing in Atlanta, going in, you have 17 returning starters at Washington, by the way. 17 returning starters. You have to be able to go in this game and deal with business. I think that it's going to be a hard task for Gus Malzahn and this team to come out gunning against Washington, getting it done, breaking in all the new starters they're going to have.
Nick Bonanno says Auburn's going to lose, can't even beat UCF. And that's kind of my point for bringing this up. There's a little bit of a bad taste left over in some Auburn fans' mouths, or just SEC fans' mouths when they think about Auburn. The SEC championship game was not good for Auburn. They got really handled by Georgia. The UCF loss, I'm going to describe that as maybe a little bit of an embarrassment for the Auburn program, given all the trash that UCF talked before that game. You got to think about this, Mike. There are not a lot of gimmies for this Auburn team this year. The home games they won against Georgia and Alabama in November, those are both road games in 2018.
Yeah.
If you don't beat Washington, who's your marquee win going to be? And Malzahn, whose popularity is about a mile wide, but about a quarter of an inch thick. I mean, all of a sudden, if you can't give some more big wins to Auburn fans in 2018, there's going to be a lot of buyer's remorse out there for Malzahn.
And I agree. But I think when I look at just the first game, that I think I line it up and say Auburn could lose to a very good Washington team. I'm a huge believer in Chris Peterson. They could lose to a very good Washington team and still be relatively successful for the rest of the year. Washington, obviously, they're not world beaters, but they were in the college football playoff 2 years ago, and they could make Auburn look bad in this game. But I think that it's up to Gus Malzahn to get it pointed in the right direction. But could Auburn come back from that and absolutely make a run at the SEC? 100% without a doubt. You're going to be breaking in a ton of new people, a couple of new coaches. I think they'll be able to get it done in the long run.
Tanner Davis says Auburn beats Washington by 2 touchdowns. That'd be a big statement. If Auburn could win that game, and this by the way, is a Georgia fan saying that, if Auburn could do that, then all of a sudden we start looking at Malzahn a little differently. I mean, that'd be a huge statement. And maybe that's the better way to think about it. It's more about not so much what does Auburn lose if it loses, but what does it gain if it wins.
Yeah, it's tough for me to imagine that. When you look at how Auburn's played the last couple of bowl games they played in, I mean, just getting taken to the woodshed by Oklahoma a couple years ago in the Sugar Bowl. These big-time games and some of these neutral site games that Auburn's played, they just haven't shown up in sometimes under Gus. So 2 touchdowns, I don't think I'm buying that right now. I think I look at what Washington has, what they're returning. Like I mentioned, 17 starters. They're bringing back a ton of talent. I have to believe Washington right now has the edge in this just because Auburn's replacing 4 offensive line starters and both running backs. It's going to be tough to do.
Mike Hardy, I believe he's referencing the Iron Bowl, says if you look at some way too early, like look-ahead point spreads, which, by the way, that's pretty early. He says that Alabama's a 14-point favorite in November against Auburn, a 28-point favorite against Louisville to open the season. That's pretty interesting there. Speaking of Alabama here, let me move on. Item number 9 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. A lot of LSU fans in the comment section the last couple of minutes been talking a lot about recruiting. There's some clear excitement right now on the part of LSU fans about maybe getting James Foster, the quarterback out of Montgomery. But how about the comparison here between brand new LSU offensive coordinator Steve Ensminger and the new offensive coordinator for Alabama, Mike Locksley, at least the guy we expect to be made official as the hire there for Nick Saban. Tommy Tuberville, the former Auburn coach, a guy who knows Ensminger well, having worked with him, made a pretty interesting quote here to SEC Country, that Steve Ensminger would be a hell of an offensive coordinator for Nick Saban. He's exactly what Nick Saban would look for. It ain't about the offense you run. It's about getting the most of the players you have. I'm excited for LSU. So Tuberville says that Ensminger would be kind of like a Saban-type guy, which obviously sort of leads to the comparison of how about the guy that Saban is going to hire in all likelihood, Locksley. I don't know if there's a way to really answer this in an expert fashion, but who you want? You want Ensminger or you want Locksley?
Listen, I think they're pretty even. And Steve Ensminger was not a guy I was high on when you're losing a guy like Matt Canada. I think that you look at it and say, man, I'm not that excited about the hire, but the same kind of goes for Alabama with me right now. I think Locksley is a guy that you had to keep on staff, but I don't know that he's your first choice as an offensive coordinator. I think you would feel better about Hugh Freeze or anybody else, Chip Long or maybe even a Matt Canada being in that direction. I just think it's too early to tell maybe. I just think that what you get out of both these guys is very similar. It's like I said, the word earlier is multiple. These guys can do the best with what they have in the cabinet right now. I think that's what you're looking for at LSU, and I guess it's what Nick Saban's looking for at Alabama.
So a lot of LSU fans really weighing in on Ensminger. They like this guy. Jake Hickenbotham says people who really know Ensminger and football philosophy say he's a great hire. The guy knows offense and is a quarterback technician. Esteban Estevez says Ensminger's a huge upgrade from Canada with his little high school flanker jet sweeps. That's a pretty bold statement to say that Ensminger's going to be better than Canada, who was a Broyles Award finalist before he came to LSU. And Cliff Nelson obviously referencing the wide receiver haul that LSU may be bringing in. That's one thing the Tigers seem to do every single year. The 2018 cycle may be no different on that. But I am really surprised how many of these LSU fans are really in on Ensminger. They have sort of bought into him in a way that I don't know that a lot of other SEC fan bases would like Ensminger, who's a bit of a well-traveled veteran. It seems like younger, innovative offensive coordinators are more in vogue here. But the LSU fans who watch our show every day, they really like Ensminger a lot.
Right, and I think it's a big deal that Ensminger has spent a ton of time under a ton of different offensive coordinators with different philosophies. When you look at Steve Ensminger's track record, I mean, he's coached under every offense you can coach under. He's done a little bit of everything. He's done the Les Miles ground and pound. He did the Matt Canada jet sweeps, and he's seen a little bit of everything. So I think that's what LSU people can be excited about. When you look back to when he was the interim offensive coordinator, he did put up great numbers and put his guys in a position to be successful. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel as far as Steve Ensminger goes, and it's not just all down.
Bobby Bowman says, is Saban that hard to work for? Obviously referencing that Saban's in a position to hire an offensive coordinator again here for the 2018 season. I mean, you played for Nick Saban. You saw his relationship with coaches and practice every single day. Is it a concern for you that there were some reports that maybe Dable butted heads with Saban a bit, and maybe that's one of the reasons that he looked to move on from Alabama? And we've heard about that with some other coaches as well. He certainly changes over guys a lot. is this about being driven to succeed, therefore some people can't hack it? Is this about being too hard to work for, and therefore some people just don't enjoy it? I mean, how concerned are you that not every assistant coach that comes through Tuscaloosa seems to enjoy working for Nick Saban?
It's not a concern for me. Listen, and I think it's true. I don't think most assistants enjoy working for Nick Saban. You have some that are lifers, like a Bobby Williams, a Joe Pendry, a Burton Burns, that have been there forever under Nick Saban, and they like working for Nick Saban because of the structure and the fact that you're going to play for championships year in and year out. But there are guys, and Brian Dable's one of them. If you have 6 kids that are like all under 10 years old, you're not going to like it. You're not going to like being on the road. The hours that Nick Saban forces you to work, he's demanding. And so I understand it when coaches are willing to move on and take other jobs and get out from under him. It doesn't concern me. You know why? Because I know that other coaches see it as a stepping stone and an opportunity to come in and work under Nick Saban, who's one of the greatest coaches of all time. And there's going to always be people that are willing to take that job. I think that's kind of the offset for me.
Logan Westerman says, I don't think Dable can recruit. He misses the NFL. That is true. If you're not an insatiable recruiter, then you're going to hate college football.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true for Dable or not. But if you don't want to be doing it 24 hours a day,
Right.
if you don't want to live and breathe that, then you're working for Nick Saban, especially, who is wired that way. It's going to be a miserable life.
That's kind of what I'm talking about. Is the coaches that really want to dig their fingers in and really want to get down to work and understand how valuable it is to work under Nick Saban for a couple of years. I think they see it as an opportunity. There's other coaches that come in and say, you know what, I don't know that I can work 18-hour days and be on the road all the time, so they don't like it as much.
All right, item number 10 here on SEC Country Live. We told you yesterday we weren't able to be here. Bad icy weather in Atlanta, and if you're not buying into what we're saying here, take a look at this Instagram video from Shaq. Shaq lives in Atlanta now because he works for TNT, does the NBA stuff. Well, Shaq, on the icy roads here, this will give you a sense for what Mike and I were trying to brave yesterday getting to work, ultimately thinking better of it. Here is Shaquille O'Neal.
It's so cold, man. Oh, sliding. You see him
Slip and
sliding?
sliding here.
Be careful on this ice. Yeah, everybody's sliding. Well, you gotta have that
Shaq, of course,
4x4.
videoing while he's driving, which may be the safest thing.
Yeah.
Getting a little plug for his Ford in there as well.
Doesn't he have like a Buick contract or something?
Then watch Shaq
Get
going
back
with
to
the, was that Cookie
Well,
Monster
no,
or
Miami.
Grover? Which one is that? Cookie Monster?
Coming home.
I don't know. I think it is Cookie Monster. That's funny right there.
So I mean, that gives you an idea. Things in Atlanta, and listen, I know some of y'all live in Louisiana, Mississippi. It's been cold and snowy. Snowed in Nashville, which it never does. Snowed in Charleston, Savannah the other day. It has been a brutal winter here.
It has.
Brutal winter.
It has. And listen, you can talk about trying to get out and everybody trying to make it in the office yesterday. I didn't leave the house. I'm not even going to lie to you. I didn't even open the door. I didn't even open the door.
Yeah.
I wanted no part of what was going on the road.
See, here's the thing, and I'm not going to complain here because I got the greatest life in the world. I'd rather come to work.
Yeah.
Because when I stay home, it's like I got a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. All they want to do is play outside. We had that much snow. They want to play in it all day long. I mean, it's not even enough to even get it in your hand. They want to play.
Yeah.
Working is so much easier than taking care of 2 young kids in the snow. I'd given anything to be at work yesterday.
Yeah, not me. I'm telling you right now, when I was in sweatpants, I didn't even open the door.
Binge watching Netflix. And
I looked out the blinds for a second, and I was like, nah.
I'd give anything. I'd give anything. But nonetheless, it's good to be back with you here today. It's been fun to be here. And of course, we'd love to have you subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, share the show with your friends on Facebook, and of course, we'll get ready to close the show the way we always do. We call it our Champion of Life. It's our kind of fun way to end the program. And today it comes from our friends over at The Athletic, the subscription website that covers college football. Well, apparently they caught up with Les Miles recently. Miles discovering for the very first time something that you may have a lot of if you have kids around the house. I'm talking about the fidget spinner. Take a look at Miles' reaction from The Athletic about seeing a fidget spinner for the first time.
This is great.
This is really funny.
What the hell is this? I think it's really, I guarantee it, people will buy this.
So the video kind of goes on. I actually gave credit the wrong source. It's not The Athletic, it's the Players Tribune, where Miles was a part of here. But he discovers the fidget spinner for the first time. Pretty funny video. You can go to the Players Tribune on Twitter, see the full video for yourself. This is why Miles doesn't have a head coaching job, though. It's goofy stuff like this. This is the reason why he's not hired. I mean, who hasn't heard of a fidget spinner? What What hole do you live in to have not heard of a fidget spinner?
This is why I find him so entertaining, though. I was like, this guy is so entertaining that he's bound to get a job at some point, and obviously he's got the podcast now. He hasn't gotten a job, but this is classic to me, man. This is why I love watching Les Miles.
Tyler Mann says fidget spinners are the dumbest things. Have you ever played with one? The truth is they are pretty addictive.
No, never played with one. Never even held one.
You may not have ADD the way that I do. I'm pretty fidgety as it is.
Definitely have ADD.
So they're pretty enjoyable. But this is why Miles can't interview for a job anymore. He's transfixed by a fidget spinner.
He just, the way he looked at it on TV, he goes, what is this?
He's like, man, these things are going to sell.
Yeah, I guarantee these things are going to do well.
Thanks, Les. We appreciate your prediction. Hey, as we said before, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Share the show with your friends on Facebook. We'll look forward to seeing you back again on Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Hopefully no snow. Hopefully no ice. No holiday. Hopefully next week, for like the first time in about a month, we can have a full week of regular show.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, and obviously recruiting and everything else we talked about.
We also want to say that this weekend, right? Some big stuff going on. I know we're like an hour late, but plug this real quick.
Yeah, I'm going to be at Alabama's championship parade this weekend. We'll be broadcasting live on the SEC Country Facebook page. I'm going to be making my correspondent debut. I'm going to be out there working the microphone and trying to talk to everybody I can get a hold of.
Just know this, while y'all are over there celebrating, drinking on that rat poison, Georgia's busy recruiting. Just know that. The rest of the SEC, they're busy working. Y'all patting yourself on the back, eating cake and drinking champagne. The rest of these SEC schools are getting to work and recruiting.
Listen, Isaac Taylor Stewart and Tyson Campbell and Patrick Surtain, they're going to be riding in the parade too. Come on,
We'll see you Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of SEC Country Live. Y'all have a good day.